The brain, the gut, the heart, and the nervous system are being shown to be the predictors of our health. If having real health is of interest to you, please listen to learn more, and welcome to the Brain Gut Connection podcast. Your host, Dave Bredhauer, will guide you through how everything inside us is connected, from our brain to our heart to our gut, how they all communicate, and how important your immune system is to this entire process. The Brain Gut Connection podcast. Let us get right into today's episode.
It's time for a quick gut check, literally. Have you ever wondered if there's a direct line from your brain to your gut? Spoiler alert, there is. And we've got all of the inside scoop waiting for you in the Brain Gut Connection newsletter. Every month, we dive deep into the stuff no one else is talking about, or maybe they just don't have the guts to. We're covering the real deal behind what's happening in that brain-gut highway, unpacking the science, the myths, and the little tricks that can make you feel a whole lot better. You'll find answers to questions like, is my gut messing with my mood? Or can what I eat last night really affect my focus today? Spoiler alert, again, it can. So if you're ready to keep your brain and gut in harmony and maybe discover why they argue sometimes, head on over to www.braingutconnect.com/subscribe to sign up for the Brain Gut Connection newsletter. Your brain, your gut, and trust me on this, your whole body will thank you. Go on, give your gut a break. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Brain Gut Connection podcast. I'm your host, Dave Bredhauer, and today we're digging deep into the incredible world of gut health and its surprising impact on our brains. I'm excited today to introduce our guest, Carolina Stukenberg, a women's creatrix transformologist and the mastermind behind Prime Integrative Nutrition. Carolina is passionate about empowering women to break free from unhealthy cycles and elevate their self-esteem through holistic healing. With her unique approach, she combines emotional intelligence with gut health, helping women to not only feel better, but live their best lives. If you're ready to dive into some transformative discussions on self-love, anxiety, and the brain-gut connection, you're in for a treat. Let's get started. Welcome to the show, Carolina. Looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Dave, here today, and to be able to share this and inspire women out there because, we're not just separated body parts that work, independently. We've got a whole human, and that means a head, heart, and gut connection, and everything comes together. And that's my passion.
Yeah, well, thanks for showing up. I appreciate you. So let's start off with a standard question I ask everybody. Let's talk about your journey from where you started to becoming a woman's creatrix transformologist.
Okay, I love that. I love that. So my story really is a lifelong story of exploration. I grew up in a home with a lot of problems. My brother was autistic. Both my parents were doctors. And there was a lot of stress around. And growing up with a lot of stress, not really realizing the impact that it has on our health. And, today stress is one of the biggest causes of illness and ailments in our society. And growing up, I'd experienced allergies, skin issues, hair loss, irregular periods. And, this was something that should have been pretty stable from a young age. And my parents tried their best going down the medical route. But as I moved out of home, I started exploring different options. And I remember being really severely depressed once at university and trying antidepressants and nothing really worked, and discovering how magnesium was so helpful for people with depression. And that's really where my journey started. As things progressed and that magnesium really started to help me, I realized, but there's so much more. And my life took me on a journey to becoming a health chef, working on yachts, getting into nutrition, and then finally hitting a wall where even though I was doing all the right things, even though I was teaching all the right things to people in terms of what we eat, how we need to live, so that our gut is in its prime and so we at our best, because it does affect our mind. I realized with women, and I'm sure this also works with men, but our stress, our mental and emotional health is like this missing key. And when we go and see doctors, they're not really looking at that aspect. But there's so much evidence today of the two connecting. And that's what led me to not only finding my deep healing, but realizing my emotional well-being needed to be fixed. And that resulted in me becoming a creatrix transformologist, helping women, and then looking at that from both ends. And from that, completely healing my body. I have no more symptoms, no more issues. And I feel like I've looked at the whole body, all the body systems that come with it, plus the emotional and mental well-being.
So, I have a couple personal questions if you don't mind. So
Absolutely.
you mentioned childhood issues, being unhealthy as a child. Do you know how you were born? Cesarean or natural?
So I was born naturally.
Okay.
I know that does have an impact, absolutely.
Do you know if your mom was healthy when she had you?
You know, according to them at that time, they would say that she was healthy. I mean, she didn't smoke, she didn't drink, but I don't think she ate particularly healthy. Even though she was a nutritionist growing up, she was not interested in food and cooking and what it meant, beyond just nutritional advice, but actual healthy food. And then a father being a doctor, often putting us on antibiotics and medications. And I know how much that affects the gut health. So even though I was born naturally, I think everything after that really added to my issues over time.
Do you know if you were breastfed, and if so, for how long?
I was breastfed, and I was breastfed for about 5 months.
Okay.
Um, my mom was a busy mom.
Yeah. Well, no. So as I'm going down these again more rabbit holes with all this,
But
is I'm finding a lot of people who complain about being an unhealthy child and going back to their birth, and then cesarean or natural. Cesarean, you don't get the external microbiome, and it takes time for that to generate. And then mom being healthy and being fed breast milk or formula. And how many people weren't fed breast milk? They were put on a bottle and never got the microbiome from mom. And we now know that, of course, it takes a while for that to develop, sometimes decades, and that leads to all kinds of issues. So I just had to ask that question. Uh, Learning more about people every day. So let's talk about some of the common unhealthy cycles you see women struggling with today.
so unhealthy cycles I see women struggling with today is a lot of the women that I've worked with, for example, often get stuck in a kind of stress response. They will have a certain amount of experiences in their life, and then they will continue to respond either in the form of fight or flight mode. So they'll freeze and they'll be stuck in a stress mode. And then when we do that as women, that actually shuts down our logical mind. We go into a very emotional mind, and that can edge neural pathways into us of negative thinking, negative self-talk, self-doubt, not trusting, being scared, fearful, and carrying that, because as women, we connect all these different experiences to all these different emotions. And that's how we basically try and avert risk in our lives as a protective mechanism. But over a long period of time, this works against them because now we're still living in stress mode. It becomes our default to protect ourselves, to survive, to just keep our head treading above water. But over the long term, really burning us out and then having that physical impact. And so I see that those emotional and thinking processes that women might get stuck in is really keeping them unhealthy, unable to stay motivated, to be able to take those healthy choices and to just get back to homeostasis, to function, to have clarity mentally, to be able to do their job or to attend to their family.
What percentage of your clients do you feel are stuck in the stress response?
Wow, I would say mm, I'm just going to pull a number, but the majority of them, so I would say 80 to 90% of them is the biggest change and the shift is when I do that emotional and mental resets so that the body can come back to homeostasis. It's a massive amount.
Yeah. Yeah, I would personally, I think I would edge the number up higher because
Yeah.
modern life it's all about stress, right? We seem to swim in it, to coin a phrase. So let's talk about gut health influence mental well-being, and why is this connection so important?
Well, it's so important because our gut and our brain are intricately connected, right? Through the central nervous system and the gastrointestinal tract and what we call the second brain, the vagus nerve. And what happens there's a lot of communication between the brain and the gut often producing the hormones for the brain. But if we are mentally and emotionally stressed, that's shutting down our gut and creating that dysbiosis. So probably not creating the right neurotransmitters and hormones, or even being able to absorb nutrients properly. And so the more science has started to delve into this, the more related we see that is. And that goes even further. Like you brought up, if you're born a cesarean and you don't have that immune system, you didn't get immunized naturally, you're already going to be at a disposition. And so all of that research really finding that connection. And yeah, the studies keep proving it more and more. I think now with the microbiome and the stress levels, like you say, being so high in our society, and most of us living on this rat race, running without ever realizing that this is not normal. We weren't designed to sustain that level of stress.
So, okay, train left the station. The thought train left the station. I was not on it. Had a question for you. So okay, let's go back to your story. So, what was the turning point for you when you discovered gut health? Right? You're not healthy. You're struggling. What was it that opened the door for you, if you will?
For me, back in the day when it was at its worst, I had no ability to even remember what I'd read 2 minutes ago. I was an emotional wreck, and it was hard to focus. It was hard to even keep a job. And I was really desperate for help, and I'd gone to doctors and I tried everything. And it was actually a functional nutritionist who had taken the time to have an interview with me that lasted for hours. But she'd gone so deep into the conversation, and what she'd realized is that I had leaky gut, I had parasites, my immune system was so low, and she'd taught me how the body all came together. And that was the initial step forward. And through going through that process of healing my own gut, I was like, aha, something nobody had taught me before. And so it was about de-stressing, and it was about getting decent rest. It was about what I was eating, getting rid of chemical foods and chemicals. And those are a different kind of stress on the body, right? Besides stress. And it was just so eye-opening, especially as a chef. So that pushed me into the direction of, okay, let's looking at food as medicine versus just a luxury that we enjoy every day, but also to enjoy it as well, right? And then bring that back to other people. And then later down the line, after doing all that gut healing, realizing that I wasn't able to control my stress response and the way I was emotionally engaging with everything because of all these traumas. So she recommended getting help, and that's where I started on that journey. But it took a very big incident in my life with my ex-husband to occur before I'd actually found that answer. And then bringing the two together and living by that, it's become my life protocol. Is like, am I emotionally, mentally well, and am I eating clean and living well if I want to feel well? Because it's too easy to say, well, I don't feel great. Let's go and take some more medication. Let's just go and get the next quick fix. And it's like our society's been dependent on that. But we need to take ownership and responsibility for the way we feel and the way we choose to live and how that affects us.
Yeah. Yeah, my story, I diagnosed type 2 diabetic when I turned 50, made no sense. And so I researched, and then I discovered not a nat not a not a well naturopath who opened my eyes up a little bit about food sensitivities and stuff, and another rabbit hole to go down. But yeah, I thought I knew all about health, diet, etc., and then had mind blown when I discovered I knew nothing. Uh, how important the gut is. So speaking of the gut, what role does gut health play in a woman's confidence and self-worth?
So, when it comes to a woman feeling confident, feeling herself, and feeling good and her gut, like things like serotonin, dopamine is actually 90% produced in the gut and then goes to the brain, right? So, like you were saying, you went through your own learning journey about how important it is. So, let's say a woman is in her 40s or 30s, okay, and we biologically change quite a lot in our lives, so we need to adapt to that. But if she's eating a high keto diet because she wants to lose weight, maybe she's not feeding her microbiome the fiber and the nutrients that it needs to create the short chain fatty acids that our body then produces and uses through having a microbiome. And so by taking care of their gut, allowing and giving the opportunity to the brain to function at its optimum. But it's not just, you know, what is our microbiome? It's things like, are you getting sleep and good sleep? Are you having off time to say, okay, just relax and allow the body to calm down. Because actually, I mean, there was an interesting study I read recently, and this, I love the way this connects this conversation here. Women, when they experience prolonged periods of stress and, burnout, adrenal fatigue, we've heard a lot about it. For men, their prolonged stress level can go a lot longer. They kind of get activated by it, but over a long period of time, women tend to then produce oxytocin in the brain, which is our very important hormone bonding chemical for when you give birth or when you make love or these very important moments in our lives. But when we are in high stress and cortisol, the brain begins to produce that to suppress the cortisol from actually affecting the brain, which acts like an acid on a woman's brain. So literally making us dumber over a longer period of time. So now that just goes to show that very intricate relationship. So now if we do not calm down and we don't stop doing that, we're not going to have that oxytocin for when you're pregnant and you're having that baby. So, there's women that experience postpartum depression. And when I look at those situations, I say, oh my gosh, you've been living at that level of prolonged stress for so long. No wonder your body's so depleted. And that's why, that connection happens so much. So if you want to feel your best emotionally, give your gut the best that you can.
How long have you been doing this work?
So I have given it my full-time dedication for the last 4 years. Prior to that, I worked part-time as a chef and then a health coach.
Okay. Okay. Just curious about these
Absolutely,
topics.
absolutely.
So we talked about confidence and self-worth. Let's explain the concept, if you will, of radical self-love and how it can change lives.
Wonderful question. Let's talk about two examples there. Let's talk about a woman who doesn't have a lot of self-love, doesn't have a lot of self-worth. She gets to, let's say, a situation for an exam if she's in university, or maybe she's going on a date. If she's got low self-worth, she's probably going to either try and self-sabotage the situation, let's say in an exam, and say, okay, I can't handle the stress. I'm just going to put it off, not study, and then I can pin down that I failed and I'm just a failure. And they accept it versus one that has high self-esteem and real self-love will actually try to do the studying, will do the work, but maybe the exam was really hard and then they don't do so great. They don't beat themselves up. They carry on preparing. They look for solutions to the problem. And so the way that you engage with your life is going to be different. Now, if you grew up in a household that was complicated, maybe you didn't get the attention that you needed, maybe you felt abandoned, maybe you don't feel worthy enough, then you're really going to come with that disposition of not knowing really how to love yourself enough. So maybe your traits would be things like people pleasing or being a martyr and putting everyone else first and ignoring your own body signs and symptoms. Then over time, destroying your health as well. But for those people to be able to see it, they need to go through some kind of extreme event to be able to realize they need changes, like setting healthy boundaries, like being able to say no, being able to take compliments and criticisms easily without it really impacting their life in such a negative way or being so difficult to accept a compliment, right? So I find that when women have that radical self-love for themselves, they wake up, they know they want to take care of themselves, they're going to do what it takes for their business or their work, irrespective of how they're feeling, because they know action and consistency means something. Then I see these women succeed in every aspect of their lives. They're better mothers, they're better friends, they're better wives, they're better in every sense. And this is such a vital thing, because if we wake up and we don't love ourselves, what are we going to allow happen in our lives? We will allow people to come in and take advantage of us, use us. And that's where we then affirm, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm worthless. I don't feel appreciated. I'm not seen, heard, or understood. And that often relates to the same feelings of I'm just not lovable. And so one has to really start exploring, why is one feeling that way? If you believe that about yourself, I want to say to those women out there, they are worth more. We all are. We came here to share something and educate and to bring our light to shine in the world. Why not be your whole, full, beautiful self, right?
Sure. So what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is self-love equates to mindset.
Absolutely, in a sense. And for the most part, we talk about it as a mindset. But it is genuinely when there's coherence between the way we think, something that we feel in our heart that is right, that is good, that suits us, and our gut instinct telling us that this is safe for us, this is the right thing for us. And I think all three of those, that's what I believe, need to come together for us to be able to experience that true self-love. Because if we just think with our minds, no heart, no gut, we might make decisions that are against our better judgment, our instinct. And then that creates a stress anyway.
How many, so from a male perspective, I find a lot of males out there suffer from lack of self-love. Do you find this majority of women that you encounter also suffer from a lack of self-love?
For the most part, it is something I have noticed. Since I've done the work that I've done, I get approached by women all the time going, "How are you this way? You're so fun and lively and confident and expressive. I want to be like you." And I realize we're a lot stuck in that. And I've seen men do the same. I just think that we express it very differently. So women would rather hide themselves and be a more agreeable, kind of like societal behaviors have taught us to be pretty enough and quiet enough and agreeable enough. And then maybe we'll fit in and be acceptable. Whereas men tend to take another route and be like, well, if I party hard enough and I drink enough and I'm cool enough, and they then damage their bodies, that's their form of expression of saying, well, I don't love myself very much to take care of ourselves.
So you mentioned boundaries. So can we talk briefly about how healthy boundaries are crucial for personal transformations?
100%, 100%. So, if we don't have those healthy boundaries, if we don't have values and morals in our lives to keep our sense of well-being, our joy, our pleasure, and minimize stress in our lives, how else are we going to do it? And so healthy boundaries can be things like maybe in a relationship or in a work environment, not to be spoken down in a certain way. You're entitled to say to the person, I'm an adult. Can you please express that in a better way? That does not, sit very well. And be able to iterate that clearly without offending the person, because we deserve to be treated with respect. And honestly, if you ever look at somebody that you look up to, they probably have those healthy boundaries. It's probably when you sit back and go, well, they didn't accept that bad behavior, so I'm allowed to too. And we look up to that. And I think for me as a woman, it's often a thing that I've never really seen a lot of female role models in that regard until very recently. I mean, now I see women all the time, but growing up, there was definitely a lack of that. And so what would be another example of like healthy boundaries? I mean, healthy boundaries, I guess, moms and their kids. The kids also have to understand that mom isn't just there for them. Mom needs to have boundaries for herself too. And the second that she does that for herself, she's also teaching the children how to have that in a healthy way, and being able to communicate that in a healthy way. So you can see how that pertains to having healthy relationships, having healthy time to oneself, and protecting one's happiness and minimizing that stress again.
Yeah, I find today in today's society with advent of social media, the boundaries have more or less just gone out the door, right? That we don't seem to have, we can't seem to have an agreeable political discourse in this country. Uh, when you mention whichever side, well, I'm on one side, and the other side, whenever you mention something bad about them, they cannot tolerate, they can't handle it. They just blow up. It's like, wow, whatever happened to having a conversation? And I don't work in corporate America anymore. I can only imagine what it's like there today. Uh, yeah, boundaries. Yeah, I think we need more of them. Uh,
I love what you brought up there about boundaries, because also what I've noticed when you talk about the generation now and all the social media that it really bombards us is the lack of tolerance that we have with each other. Because it's something to say like, oh, you can be a woman, you can be a pretty woman, or it can almost be insulting now to say that, or it's almost all politicized. If you're overweight, or are you black, are you white, or are you Latina? And so everything comes with this, it's almost like an attack. to the point that I know when I've had to use social media to advertise, I can't even use certain words like weight loss because it's offensive now. And so we've kind of blurred the lines between freedom of expression, which we all need to express ourselves to feel whole and to be our whole selves. But then also that means tolerating other people. And that's where healthy boundary comes in of doing it either way in a respectful way. So what is this new generation bringing? I'm not sure, but hopefully as they grow up, they will realize there's method behind this madness, behind these old school rules that I really live by and love today.
Yeah, I'm going to deviate here before we get back to it, but gym culture in the U.S. is unbelievably toxic. I walk in, I look around, and now if you look around and you just look at somebody, you end up on TikTok or whatever as a creep because you looked at some woman who's in a public
Right.
area recording her.
Right.
Yeah, so okay, enough about boundaries. Let's move on. So let's talk about the myths about women's health and empowerment. What do you think need to be debunked?
I want to debunk for women that to get empowered to regain all that self-confidence, that authenticity, that alignment for themselves, that coherence between the head, heart, and gut doesn't have to be like facing your dark side and doing the dark work and years of therapy and, trying everything under the sun. I've honestly found a way that was biologically designed to work for women that works quickly. But it's so hard for us to believe that because the society's taught us, no, it's got to be difficult, it's got to be hard. And for women, we've often said to each other, we have to talk about things to move past them. But the honest truth is, talking about it often keeps us reliving in that situation.
Yeah.
And then aging and causing almost like a permanent neural pathway in our brains. So, what is psychology and all these other methodologies doing if it's not getting results? So, if you're a woman and you've been out there and you've tried different types of modalities and therapies and you keep coming up to the same issue, I'm going, well, something hasn't worked. Now, this is not to put down men, but as a society, most of the things that exist as modalities and therapies were designed by men. Most of the scientific studies were done on rats, for example, that were castrated and called females. So they don't even really look at the dynamics of really studying females. I think the first real study on female rats and the female brain was in 1994 in the USA.
Wow. Wow.
So, to bring that in and say, like, to find a modality that's designed by women for women for the way women function, totally revolutionizes the way we can get to that. Because it's not about the story, it's about the belief system and the way we perceive. And yeah, I want to debunk that for women. It doesn't have to be this long, laborious process. Me and thousands of other women have gone through this process I have, and it just works. But you have to be ready and willing.
And interesting comment. When I was in college, I worked for 6 years at a pharmaceutical research firm, and I was in the animal care department. We managed the care of the animals, and we had at one time a monkey, rhesus monkey breeding colony. Other than that, I don't think we had any long-term studies that were not male. I mean,
Right.
I'm sitting there thinking about this. All the rats were male. All the hamsters are male. Uh, wow, that's interesting. I never thought about that. Never thought about it. Never entered my mind. Yeah,
Oh,
again,
a lot of that. And you think about medications and things that have been put out into the industry for women, not actually ever having been tested on anything that was genuinely field because it's complicated medically to test on a female rat with a hormone cycle.
yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
mean, I get logic.
offline we can have a conversation about
Yeah.
how they do studies and how wacky that stuff is,
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
and how much abuse is in the industry. But let's move on.
Absolutely.
So, can you share a success story from your practice that resonates with you?
Okay, I mean, I've got a
No
couple of
names.
loved ones.
No names.
Absolutely, no names, no names. Everything's obviously very private, especially when working in this space with women. But one woman that really inspired me when I took her on, she had such severe facial rosacea where it was just. It was swollen, it was red. She was so embarrassed to even go out in public and had spent so many years with doctors trying to resolve the problem. And again, medicine separating her body into different parts and then medicating and nothing really working. And she came to us and we decided, and she was just like willing to try anything. And she was crying. She'd lost her self-confidence. She'd lost her self-worth. She just felt so ugly all the time. And when she'd gone through this entire Creatrix transformology process, by the end of it, it was 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 weeks long. The impact on her skin had gone down 80% without changing anything else except her perceptions and her beliefs through this modality. And then went back to the doctors and they were just blown away. And she pinned it down to growing up unable to express herself, had built up and built up and built up and built up until she was in her 30s and started exploding out of her skin because in work she couldn't express herself. In her relationship, she couldn't express herself. She was just stuck. And that for me was just so mind-blowing to see that now she's so inspired. She runs her own podcast. She interviews other women all the time. She puts her face out there. It's 99% resolved, right? There's still other things going on, but the improvement was so massive and she's never looked back. It's changed her career. It's changed her life. It's changed her relationship. She got married afterwards. So, what a boost for me to be able to see a woman come from that. And honestly, we don't say that this modality there is, going to have this physical impact, but if it does, even better.
Well,
I say the gut brain proves itself.
Let's go down that rabbit hole. Can you give the listeners an explanation about this modality?
An explanation of how it works.
What's
absolutely.
involved?
What's involved with it? Oh, that's a little harder to explain. Sessions with a Creatrix transformologist is not talk therapy. So we're in the business of before and after and being resolved, being whole. It was designed, like I said earlier, looking at all the biological differences of women. So literally, like the way we physically see, women have more P ganglion cells in their eyes and men have more G ganglion cells. So we perceive things differently. Let's say women's brains are smaller, but we actually have a much more active prefrontal cortex and an anterior cortex, and our hypothalamus is bigger, or the corpus callosum in the middle is bigger. And so when they start looking at that and realizing how women interpret the world, because we're much more inferential about information, we tend to see things from outside. So this modality works with all of these considerations to bypass the woman's critical mind, the logical mind, because we connect things emotionally to everything in our brain. Every little moment, every little event is somehow connected, whereas men have everything boxed up or nicely filed in and none of the boxes touch, right? One thing at a time. And so that modality was created in that manner. Now, it's not NLP, it's not behavioral science. It's really a kind of therapy inside of a modality that walks a woman through an incredible journey, an incredible story where she gets her own perfect wisdom. Like so many of the gurus I've said out there have said, you've got everything you need inside of you. What if you could access those answers and have those breakthroughs? And by bypassing this critical mind with this information about how women's minds and emotions work, we're able to get her that wisdom. And right after every session, it has changed the way she will perceive something. So come to her to facing that challenge, that exact same challenge she was struggling with before, she will be able to see it differently, choose to respond to it differently, and then create the life that she really wants in a way, because she's not going to just fall into the same repetitive motion. And also what they've been showing through this modality as well is how certain behaviors can be passed on genetically, epigenetically, just like, physical ailments can. And so when they start healing that, the suppression of women's history, maybe it, like we'll say, I got my brown hair and brown eyes from my gran, but I also got her character traits. So, which one comes first, the chicken or the egg? And so by going through this beautiful journey story without them being involved in the story, I don't know how else to explain it. Some of the women have come out the other end and say, well, that was bizarre, but I feel so calm. And that wasn't hard at all. And I think that's the most enjoyable thing for me, is being able to say to people, you don't have to tell the story. You don't even have to relive the trauma. I don't need to know your whole history. Just come and get rid of the issue. And that issue might be guilt, it might be shame, it might be constantly second guessing yourself, which is incredibly common for women, feeling not good enough, for example, as well. So we go straight to the point.
So it sounds like this is a discovery. So we all know what we know. We all know what we don't know, but we don't know what we don't know, right?
100%.
So it sounds to me like this is, peeling back the blinders to look beyond the smaller subsections and look at the what we don't know that we don't know. Because I mean, my personal experience, my personal life, that's where all of my uh, issues lie, right? Is is my subconscious is formed 0 to 7 years of age. Conscious sets on top, and then the subconscious is we live into that takes us forward in life. And when you're told you're X, Y, or Z, and you grow up believing you're X, Y, or Z, and then of course the
Exactly.
subconscious is so difficult to change when in fact there's a number of things you can do to change it. And when you do, all of a sudden the skies part and the storm clouds go away. So it sounds like that's what this modality is kind of all about.
It is. It is. It's a modality that not only works on the subconscious level, but on a conscious level thereafter, because that allows the rewiring of the brain when you see things differently. So when you think about like going to a therapist and talking, it's only working on a conscious level. And then you might go to somebody who works on an unconscious level, like a hypnotherapist. And then you'll go to somebody who wants to work on an energetic and a more spiritual level. But again, kind of like medicine, it's separating it all. So in this system, we're making sure all of that comes together because as women, to have that deep, profound healing, we don't want to remove a problem and just, excuse me, leave a gaping hole. We want to fill it in with a better belief system, the right belief system, the right wisdom that that person needs. And everyone's different. And
So,
so, yeah.
so you said the modality is designed for women. Would it work on men?
It's such a cool question that I'm so glad you asked that. They tried it on men. It had zero impact on men. Zero. And
Interesting.
I mean, they took the same intake process. So they wanted to see change, they wanted to see shift. And the woman who designed it tested it for a year on a group of men with zero results. And the woman that came in, 100% of them had results. So it was just, and we're trying to find actually, I mean, if anybody out there is listening, please contact me because we would love to take this further into medical studies. We want professionals to come and see and study further what we are witnessing and take it to that next level.
Yeah, there was a book that was published. A female psychologist went out and she got a great response. 1,500 results came back in, and she wrote a book. And can't think of the author's name. I can't think of the book. But it basically laid out a woman's life from birth to death and how things occur in all women's lives 2 to 5 years apart. So some at 5 years old, this happens. It may be seven, it may be three, right? And it goes through the entire person's life. And then a male psychologist just talked to his male psychologist buddies, not a very large sample, and he wrote a book, and I think it was called Seasons, or the woman's book was called Seasons. I forget. But he laid out basically that, what were the big 13, right? Before that, there's other ages, but 13 when you're a teenager, 16, you drive a car, 21, 17, 18, eligible to vote. And some back then you could drink. 21, you can drive a car. 21, you're an adult, right? 25, etc. And I wonder if that's part of this where the separation between women and men. I'm babbling now. This
I
is
mean,
fascinating.
because we as women are different. I mean, in the growing process, right? If
Yeah.
you see little boys are so much better at taking risk. They'll build a ramp and
Oh,
they'll drive their bike into it and they'll crash. They're not concerned about the pain and the repercussions. Whereas girls, at a certain age, I think it's at about 9 or 10, maybe in that book, that would be a good explanation. We tend to get really risk averse. We
yeah.
are much concerned with safety. It is our biological makeup because we are literally female. Imagine now we have to be a mother, we have to be a protector. We're going to be risk averse. And so in those cycles of life, we actually physically and mentally and emotionally experience them completely differently. Things like watching a movie. and a guy watches a scene where cars are crashing and they're shooting and it's a war scene. He's all excited. He feels the camaraderie. He feels emotion. The woman is feeling terror, panic, stress, gross. And then a woman watching a romantic scene is feeling, what the guy's watching in a war scene, the camaraderie, the connection, the bonding, and she's producing oxytocin. And in those phases in our life, I think women experience monthly cycles. Then we have pregnancy and motherhood, and then we have later premenopause, menopause, and aging. We are so much more aware of those stages in our lives, I think, than men are, which is kind of a pity, because if men spoke about it more, I do believe that they would tackle their health and their well-being so much better as well.
Well, I think it goes back to the fact that men are, number one, stupid about a lot of things, right? I mean, when
We
I was
need them.
younger,
We love them.
throw caution to the wind, let's go do it. It never went with women because women would caution you, don't do that. That's stupid. Oh, no, we'll go have fun. Uh, yeah, interesting. So let me ask a question here. So let's go back to gut health and how detoxing relates to emotional healing.
How detoxing relates to emotional healing. All
Yeah.
right, perfect. So, in the process of detoxing, there's the physical aspect, right? Cleaning the body of the chemicals and the toxins, and so that it will function, like I mentioned earlier, so that the hormones and neurotransmitters in the gut then go to the brain. But it's more than that. The mental activity of engaging with detoxing also means looking at the relationship that we have with food. So, if somebody is bulimic or emotional or an emotional eater, like that's an example of emotional eating. There is this connection. And so when we detox and realize, oh, I'm just going to quickly eat this whole bag of chips and chocolate and everything else that's not good for me and pretend nobody saw me, you're disrespecting, you're not detoxing. What is that emotional connection? And so often there's this relationship between mentally, emotionally detoxing things that are not good for us, the way we see and connect with our food, and eating in a calm, happy way that makes us feel better versus self-sabotaging, making ourselves feel worse. So the two kind of really go hand in hand. And that's where I saw for the better part, when I first started health coaching, I took on some men. They found it very easy. Put something into action, go ahead and do it. But for women, depending on her hormone cycle, she's on a detox plan and now it's the wrong week. All she wants is chocolate. So for her, the detox is, well, maybe we want to get better, more magnesium and dark chocolate into your system. That's what your body's craving. So we're listening more intently to, is this an emotional response or is this a physical response in terms of detoxing, and what can we do about it? Because in the future, you want to set yourself up that you're not going to respond in a negative way to yourself, right? So setting yourself up right.
I always thought, again, from the male perspective, detoxing is, all physical. You drink something or you limit yourself from something, and you're flushing the system out, right? You experience what's it, Herxheimer,
Yeah.
Herxheimer?
Yeah. Horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible. Horrible.
But you know something's happening, right? Uh,
Right. You're getting better.
Good indication of a bacterial die-off. Yeah. So, well, I never thought of it from any other perspective. Uh, it's just something I did to feel better and then
Right.
move
But
on.
it does make you feel better, right?
But
It
only
did
fit.
make.
Yeah, but just physically. I never thought about it from a mental, spiritual perspective before. Again, point made. Men are different. Um, so let's talk about women trapped in their current position. What would you suggest for women trapped in their current
And
state?
it depends. When I jump in with women, I always say let's look at the whole of you. Okay. And we have different aspects of life. And I'd say take the time and the cadence to reflect in your life, maybe twice a year instead of just at New Year's or 4 times a year, and see, where are you not fulfilling yourself? Is it family and relationships? Is it your financial and work environment? Is it your spirituality or your faith or your belief in something, even if you're atheist? Is it your physical health that is limiting you? Is it the stress? And so looking at the different aspects of our lives, going, well, where do we need to focus and take reasonable steps that is achievable, not trying to have a six-pack and a perfect body, but say, let me just be a little bit better every day, every month, bit by bit, without putting all that pressure. Now, when it comes to women being stuck, I would say, let's take a quick look. Is this really a gut problem? Are you experiencing hormone irregularities? Are you experiencing bowel movement problems? Are you experiencing brain fog? Are you experiencing cramps and pains? And are you experiencing anxiety and you don't really have a solid reason for it? Then let's look at your gut. Let's look at your stress levels. You can actually get tested for that and check it out, or we can do, a test on a weekly basis where we experiment. But if it's an emotional thing, and you're not able to get out of that negative loop of negative self-talk and second guessing and wondering if you're good enough and not being seen, heard, or loved, then jumping into seeking that help, because once that gets resolved, it becomes so much easier to take care of your physical body. And also that's going to put you back into homeostasis. For me personally, I tell them, look, my highest recommendation is for most people in society, get the widest variety of probiotics as often as you can, because science is proving how much that affects our mood and our well-being. But then also taking a concerted effort to eat 80% of the time, like clean, healthy, real food, right? I know we're all going to eat our garbage some stage, but with those two things, go out there and do it. Just do it.
Thank you for that. So I got one last question. I've exhausted my list here. So if you can give us one powerful takeaway that you want our listeners to remember, what would it be?
Gosh. Whew.
No pressure.
So,
no pressure.
Yeah. No pressure.
You got
So
5
many
seconds.
things. Just one thing. I guess to the women listeners out there is, it's trust yourselves. Like we've I guess in society we've lost our way a little bit in the liberation of women, and then becoming quite masculine and trying to find our balance and where do we belong in society. And a lot of us are looking up to male role models. And we bring different traits to society. We bring different skills, different talents, different ways of loving that men also want from us, and that we need to teach our boys and we need to teach our girls. So let's lean into our femininity. Let's lean into our natural traits of being emotional beings that want to connect deeply, that want to help, that want to nurture. It makes us feel better. It makes us feel whole, instead of trying to fit into a box. Like, it's comparing like Samsung and iPhone. We function and think differently. So be what you are and lean into that as much as you can, and trust your gut. If something doesn't feel right, follow it.
Words to the wise. I have a couple of experiences in my own life where my gut said run and I didn't. And
How did that work out?
I wish I would have run. Yeah.
Right?
Okay, well, I'm going to close the show. I want to thank you, Caroline, for showing up. I really appreciate the conversation. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so,
welcome.
so wonderful to share. And, I know we could probably jump in for 3 hours, continuously discussing, because there's so much to this. There is just so much to it, right?
Yeah, it's been a fun time for me. So I'm going to say goodbye to the listeners. Thanks very much for showing up, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now. Want to connect with Carolina? She's just an email away at carolina@primeintegrativenutrition.com. You can also explore more about her transformative work and services at www.primeintegrativenutrition.com. Don't wait. Reach out and start your journey to empowerment today. And hey, who knows? Maybe she'll throw in some good food tips too.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Brain Gut Connection podcast. Stay connected with us directly through www.braingutconnect.com. You can also join the discussion on Instagram at Brain Gut Connection and YouTube. If you would like to speak with us, please send us an email to dave@braingutconnect.com. And as always, thank you for listening. This concludes the most thought-provoking portion of your day. Until next time, stay happy, healthy, and educated.